The Row actually has new investors now, which is actually a very, very interesting conversation to open. If you guys aren't too privy on what's been going on, of course, I'll say, but it would be good to read this article via BOF because BOF have actually done their due diligence and done a lot of research into a lot of the figures behind this brand. So I would definitely say that this article is something that you should check out. But essentially, in summary, to summarize the article, what's been going on is the Wertheimers, who are the owners of Chanel and L'Oreal, have invested in the Row. And there are also a bunch of other companies that have invested in the Row. They have this like joint fund that makes them minority investors and gives them a minority stake in the Row. So it includes the founder of Net-a-Porter. It includes the co-founder of Moda Operandi. So it definitely seems that, a lot of people that work in fashion believe in this brand and they're all putting their money where their mouth is and really investing loads of money. Now, for people that aren't too aware about the Row, that would be very surprising. But in case you aren't too privy to what the Row is, so the Row is a fashion brand, a luxury fashion brand that was started by the Olsen twins, so Mary-Kate and Ashley. It's basically risen to critical acclaim. It's very different to most celebrity brands, which I found very interesting just studying the brand as a case study. Most celebrity brands, because celebrities kind of in a tacky way put their face front and center, what happens is people just view the brands as not luxury and like merch lines for a celebrity. Whereas with the Row, they kind of don't have a big social media presence personally. They don't put their face front and center with the brand. And I have seen journalists and articles kind of claim that one thing that, gives the Row kind of like a USP, a unique selling point, is the fact that they don't have to rely on their stardom for the success of the brand. And I agree with that to a sense, but I also think it's disingenuous to say that because the reason why the Row was big at the start was because they are rich and famous and celebrities. And therefore, when they started the brand, it was basically their celebrity friends that were wearing the brands. And even though they weren't deliberately trying to endorse things that way, it just so happens that their friends are very influential and have loads of fans. So by the time they start wearing things, that becomes the talk of the town. It's only a matter of time before more people start wearing it. So I definitely think that they use their stardom to start the brand and to pivot into a very successful luxury brand, but they don't rely on it. And that's why I think the Row is viewed very differently to a lot of other brands. It also tends to be the case that because of the Row's price point, it's seen as like really luxury. A lot of people see the Row as the American version of Loro Piana or the American Hermès. And of course, they have like bags that are close to Hermès prices. They're seen as like a cheaper alternative to Hermès. So that's kind of one of the big selling points of the Row. A lot of people like the Row because the Row is kind of like that thing where it's luxury, but it doesn't shout. It's not in your face. It's the kind of luxury where it isn't about logos. It's about silhouettes. It's about tailoring. It's about, this quote unquote quiet luxury that I find a very cringe term. So yeah, that's kind of like the rundown on what the Row is. But as far as the investors go, I found it really, really interesting because the first name, when I saw L'Oreal, I was like, I'm very curious to see what L'Oreal is going to do with this brand. Chanel also. These are two brands that I think are, if they're not careful, they'll have problems in the future because Chanel have had a lot of issues in the press with their quality. A lot of people have said, the hardware is cheaper, the leather is cheaper, the garments kind of break easily these days. And it's a big problem. It's a big problem across fashion in general, especially in luxury fashion, where they charge these insane prices and you're buying garments that, whether it's worth it or not is a different conversation to have, but the quality is just not on par based on how much these things cost. And now you have companies like L'Oreal getting involved. L'Oreal is very famous for, buying fragrance houses and diluting the formulation of the fragrances to kind of make more money and to improve profit margins. Chanel is known over time, like I've said, to reduce quality of their garments and their products to increase profit margins. And considering that how the Row is marketed And where the Rose sits in the market is a brand that is seen as the height of luxury, bar something like Loro Piana or Hermès or those kind of brands. It's seen as like super luxe. It's ultra expensive. To have these kind of, companies like L'Oreal and Chanel that I just know are just going to come in if they don't, put their foot down and, fight against it. These companies are going to come in and just basically fuck up the quality and just start cutting corners. And I feel like the road could become a shell of itself. So I'm hoping that that doesn't happen. But that was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that, okay, these are the companies that are investing. These are the main companies. Yeah, just like Al says, they famously fucked up the Tom Ford formulas. That's what they're known for. It's literally what they're famous for. They really like go in and just start messing up all the formulations and stuff. So I'll be very curious to see how, these things happen. But I think the investment makes sense. It was a surprise to me, but it totally makes sense. A conversation that we have in fashion these days is the fact of a lot of brands are trying to get rid of certain customers and kind of promote their brand to a upper class customer base. They want to be seen as more luxury. It's kind of what Burberry tried to do but failed, where they increased the prices by crazy amounts. It didn't work, and now they're kind of shuffling and struggling. And every brand wants to be where the row is. A younger brand that somehow is at the price point of close to Chanel and Loro Piana. That is where every single brand wants to be, because what happens is when a financial downturn happens, these brands aren't affected at all, because the type of customer base that would buy, a jacket or a coat for $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, they aren't going to be affected by any sort of economic downturn. And that's why every person wants their brand to sit where the Rose sits in the market, to be successful at this kind of price point, because it almost makes you like crisis proof in a sense. And yeah, every brand is just vying for that. And it's also kind of this sense that the row doesn't have to try hard also, because it's very much, like I said, it's not a shouty brand. It's a brand where it's kind of like, if you know, the people that love it. The people that can afford it, can afford it. And they just don't try hard. Like if you look at their social media, look at what they post on Instagram. It's not, they don't really post campaigns or anything. They just kind of post artwork. They're posting a Man Ray lampshade from 1964. Just like really cool like stuff, a playlist on Spotify, September 2024. They really don't have to try when it comes to marketing, because people honestly believe in this clothing so strongly. And it's very interesting to see. But that's why, to me, when I sat down and thought about it, I was like, yeah, this investment makes so much sense. Everyone wants to be part of a brand, or to have a stake in a brand that isn't really affected by, changing economic situations and stuff like that. And I think the Rose sits perfectly in the market. Also, thank you so much, Rachel, for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for always tuning in and being amazing. I actually have some figures that I found out, because Bloomberg were the people that actually reported on this story. But essentially, they had different people that were suggesting how much the row makes, because they evaluated it at the value of $1 billion, which is insane for a brand, that hasn't been around that long. When you consider that there are luxury brands that, don't make as much revenue, and like storied luxury brands that have been around forever that don't make as much revenue as the row. That's insane, because they haven't been around for like crazy amounts of time. They've been around since 2006, which is a long time. But in fashion years, where in luxury fashion, people kind of market the heritage of a brand, they don't really have a lot of heritage to market in that sense. So that's insane. People have estimated that they make a revenue of $250 million a year, with an operating profit of $60 million a year, which is like just totally insane. And when you think of the investment of the row, also, there is a lot of potential to grow. And reading a lot of the reports that I was looking at, first of all, their menswear is limited. They don't really have a lot of menswear collections. They don't release a lot of things in menswear sizes. And so if they open up their brand to menswear, that's an opportunity to make even more money. They have growth opportunities when it comes to distribution. Their distribution is very, very limited. They don't really do a lot of like beauty products. They don't do a lot of perfumes. They could do more things like homeware. These are all things that they can expand, and they can learn from a designer like Eddie Slimane. Eddie Slimane is someone that, went to Celine, made an amazing fragrance line similar to what he did at Dior, where he started the Dior Privé, which is a Dior private fragrance line. That happened. Of course, since then, Eddie Slimane has increased and expanded the beauty line. You see like bath products now, you see lipsticks, you see foundations, things like that. And Celine makes so much money for LVMH now. It's one of the top 3 brands in terms of revenue for LVMH, which is insane. And I think the Row has a lot to learn from that. And in the reports, they were mentioning that one of the reasons why the Row was looking for investors is they need a lot of money to start to invest in these things. Like, okay, let's open up some more menswear products. Let's invest in beauty. Let's invest in homeware. Let's increase our distribution. These are things that are very capital intensive. And so they're not really going to be able to do that unless they have big, big investors. And that's where you get, the L'Oreals, the Chanels, the Net-a-Porters and things like that. So very, very interesting story. I just really hope they don't mess up the Row. I just can see L'Oreal and Chanel, those 2 brands, just cutting corners like every other luxury brand. And before we know it, everything is going to go to shit. And a good example of, some of the risks that can come with this investment, I'll share this tab. So this is one of the really famous pieces from the Row, these kind of like jelly shoes inspired by the 80s. And these were really, really big on social media. A lot of people are buying them. And eventually they had to like slow down the production of them because they kept breaking. Literally. The quality was so bad and they cost $900. They retailed for $900, guys. And they kept breaking. Like loads of people that bought them, they would just like snap to the point where they're like, okay, we need to like kind of stop producing these and actually work on our production. And so even the Row itself that is known for, top-notch quality and the highest level of quality, even they have like quality issues that they need to work on and they need to fix. And so when you now have these investors that I don't really trust when it comes to quality. I don't trust Chanel. I don't trust L'Oreal. I just hope they don't bastardize the whole thing. I really, really hope they don't bastardize the whole thing because I think that would be a damn shame considering how well I think that the Olsen twins have branded their brand, how well they've, positioned it in the market. When you look at one of their most famous bags, the Margot bag, which a lot of people compare to like Birkins and stuff and say it's like the cool girl Birkin, the more affordable Birkin, the more, like attainable Birkin in a sense. And these go for, here you can see prices £5,500. There's a suede version that is £5,200. The smaller version, £3,400. Like they are so well positioned in the luxury market from a price standpoint, so perfectly positioned. And these things sell out. Like, look, this bag is sold out. It's £4,400 essentially. These things fly off the shelves. Like people really, really want these things. Bob says at the end of the day, it's all about money. Let me see what other people are saying in the comments before I continue ranting away. Leo says, I'm very interested to see how the investment impacts their back end to account for increased interest. New product iterations are mostly the storefront expansion opportunities. Now, this is a really good thing to bring up because something I'm wondering is part of the appeal of the Row the fact that it's kind of limited because things do sell out and some things can be very hard to get. Not as hard as Hermès, of course, but some of it is still really hard to get. Is that part of the appeal? If, of course, these investors come in and improve infrastructure and production to the point where they can produce so many, big quantities, is that a good thing? will people kind of be turned off the brand because it's not as exclusive? You know how snooty people are. The second that something is too accessible, they're like, oh no, it's too accessible. I don't want to be like everyone else. On to the next brand. Is that a thing that's going to happen? Yoji Cardo Avocado. First of all, thank you very much for joining and being a member. But Yoji Cardo Avocado, I love that name, says, the only ones besides Hermès who have been able to do this insane price surging thing, like Bottega, is flopping with it. Loewe is too. And yeah, kind of like I said too, Burberry is flopping with it as well. A lot of brands are flopping with it. I think the reason why the Row gets away with it is the prices have been insane from the start. Of course, they did increase their prices, and now they're even more insane. But they've always been insane. Like, I've always known the Row prices to not make sense. They've always been out of my tax bracket, like completely out of, you know, any kind of tax bracket that I'm in. Leo says he wants to join. I'd love you to share your thoughts. I'll share the link in the chat right now, Leo, and you can join and share your thoughts on the Row. But yeah, I do hope that they work on the products, because the Row now, like I said, even though people view it as like this high quality brand, there are a few of their pieces that aren't the best quality. And I think a lot of people do believe the hype and just believe that because of the price point, everything is made well, when really with the jelly shoes, for example, you're literally buying plastic shoes for $1,000. That's literally what it is at the end of the day. And if you can afford it, fair enough. But I just don't like that consumers are okay with paying $1,000 for a shoe that just snaps so easily, to the point where they had to literally stop production because of how the bad and negative press and reviews they were getting for it. I just don't understand that personally. Culture says, I've always viewed the Row as a Phoebe fill-in. I guess I have heard this, and Culture, I do agree with you to an extent. What I will say, though, is that the Row has been around for a long, long time, since 2006. And, you know, at the start, when the Row started, they were, you know, doing the Phoebe Philo thing. But I think when the Row really exploded into the mainstream was when Phoebe Philo left Celine. Because when Phoebe Philo left Celine, that Phoebe Philo customer that wanted the very luxury piece that's easy to wear, that they can, you know, buy a cohesive wardrobe, which the Row offers, timeless pieces, not following trends, not trend driven, well made. There weren't too many options. The only options then were the Row. You had Bottega under Daniel Lee. You had Peter Doe. You had Rock. Rock is also someone that worked under Phoebe Philo. Those were the options. So a lot of people flocked to the Row. So even though the Row were kind of slowly, progressively building their customer base, I think a big explosion and a big jump happened when Phoebe Philo left Celine, because there was a hole that was left, and there was a target audience that wasn't, you know, being catered for outside of the brands like Bottega, Daniel Lee, people like Peter Doe or the Row, for example.
Something that we're discussing in the chat, and you also brought up, was the quality conversation that L'Oreal has a history of, especially with their fragrance line and so forth, right? And one of the things that I kept on thinking about was, well, the first thing I did was I looked at the portfolios of all the other investment companies that were part of this $1 billion conversation.
Right.
And one of them invested in Skims, so that on one side, they've also invested in Square, I think it is Slice. It's the payment portal. They've invested in payment portals, and
Stripe.
Farfetch. Yeah, Stripe and Farfetch, and then a bunch of other brands. So I can't neglect the conversation about quality as you grow, because one of the things I was saying to someone in the chat, I think was Culture, was it all depends on how quickly the Row is expected to recoup. Like, if they're expected to recoup hundreds of millions in a year or 2 years, especially given the economic time and climate we're in, then we can all just say quality is going down the line. No matter what price they put down, like if you expected to do it quickly, then you can't find certain factories, because at LVMH and Kering, they have factories that won't let you in the door if you're not part of that conversation.
But isn't that so off-brand for the Row? Because the Row is supposed to, like, the Row is the brand that tells people they can't use phones because they don't care about social media. The Row is the brand where the two people that basically started it barely have a social media presence. Like the Olsen twins, I don't even think they have an Instagram. So like,
no, they low key.
so they're supposed to be low key. Everything's supposed to be low key. It's so off brand for a brand like The Road to start just frantically trying to sell loads of products and like being desperate about it. That's so like off key for The Row.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's the issue, it's the blessing and the curse that comes with getting massive investment, even if it is from different a bunch of different parties, right? Because to me, when I first heard the news, I thought, okay, cool, a bunch of storefronts. Like you're gonna start going into maybe more stores in Europe, a couple in Asia,
Right.
and slowly rolling out products that method. And one of the things I also thought about was their valuation also has a lot on potential. So in business, you have two sides of the coin, which is like your investment is on what you currently possess, IP, product lines, so forth. And then the other side of
Right.
it is what you can present that can be monetized in the future. So as we speak about menswear and so forth, they may never even have to go into an extensive menswear line. They could have more accessory lines, different kinds of accessories, fragrances, luxury experiences, because they can just look at it and say, well, how do we expand without shooting ourselves in the
Yeah.
foot?
It's because
Yeah.
with The Row, because they do, I'm even going through the menswear now on their website. They do have menswear, but like I said earlier, it's limited. And a lot of the products that people want, like some of the silhouettes of the women's wear that a lot of men would want to buy, they don't make them in men's sizes. So even though they do make menswear, a lot of the menswear pieces that they have, people aren't really interested in.
Well, it's very interesting. I think maybe the only parallel I can think where they could do something, or not the only, but I think of maybe a Kiko example where there's somewhat of a menswear creative designer brought in that focuses on that, and maybe the house looks to expand in that manner where you have there's cohesion in the fact that they're releasing at the same time at first, and you kind of have certain cues and codes that you abide by season, and then you can grow both of these things. But
Right.
this valuation a lot more tells me that it's storefronts. I know it may not look like it, but they only have 3 stores as it stands apparently, right? They have hero
Yeah.
products already, and they are being marketed, or let me say promoted. Their PR and everything is being done against Phoebe Philo, Bottega's, and all of these ones. Phoebe Philo's opening storefronts now. Bottega
Yeah.
has storefront presence in a lot of countries that some are just purely bags and certain smaller pieces. This is the answer where it's like it looks like in some countries they may just have a bag presence, maybe a few hit items, and maybe your sales assistant can order something for you. And
Yeah.
luxury experience from the row is going to be emphasized rather than, or let me not say rather than, but in addition to luxury product and the air of having something that is a quiet luxury in inverted commas, because I
Right.
hate that term.
Yoji Cardo Avocado said there's a reason why actual quality brands like Greedy, MA Plus, Alina Dawson, etc. are so much smaller scale because you cannot scale this up and stay profitable and ethically done. Yeah, I do agree with you to a point. I totally agree, because the kind of factories that do like the quality control is really rigorous aren't huge, and the second that you need to like increase production is when you start outsourcing to like factories that can produce like 2,000 jackets a year or something insane like that. And at that point, how can you quality control 2,000 jackets a year? Like how?
There's not enough hires for that, especially with the way that they run their business. Like the amount of hires required to like go 5 times over, double your current production line is insane. I don't think people understand. Like if they're doing limited runs or not a lot and prioritizing quality, and then all of a sudden you want to go hyper quality, hyper size, hyper production. You're talking about
Exactly.
five quality control agents globally, and that's expensive. Like yearly, that's expensive.
But I can imagine like the investors from Chanel and L'Oreal especially, they're licking their lips because they're thinking, if we can cut corners, these profit margins are insane. Like they're selling t-shirts,
Yeah.
wool t-shirts for like £1,100. Like the profit margins are disgusting.
I think Chanel is licking their lips because they found an answer to like they don't have to have presence in certain places because they have the row that adds to their portfolio. They have another
Right.
brand that's like, oh my gosh, they can add to this American answer to a lot of brands we were supposed to compete with. So whatever hire we make at Chanel for CD is like, it's fine. Like, we good. These guys got this other stuff that adds.
What is this is actually a really good question I want to ask because I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Do we look at the row as more luxury than Chanel? And why I'm asking this is when people compare the row, they say that the row is an American Loro Piana or Hermès. No one actually mentions Chanel.
Okay, here's my answer. And I feel like it's going to sound like a dodge, but my answer is a lot of what the PR around the row is to position yourself with brands that are like exclusive. And by exclusive,
Right.
I mean like some level of inaccessible, like Loro Piano's marketing, Loro Piano's way of sitting and getting to a store, like even Hermès, the way that they pitch their bags to certain things, like their PR team does more work in pitching themselves against brands
Yeah.
that are exclusive and or somewhat inaccessible, regardless of your financial ability. I think Chanel can anyone, if you have the money, can get into Chanel. Now, granted, there are products that they'll say they don't sell, and you need to know the right SA and so forth to get in. But you know, it doesn't beat what the Bottega sell is in terms of quality, air of luxury, air of exclusivity. Like it's a different thing. But also
Do
at
you
the
know
same
why?
hand, I feel like
Do you know why I was asking that question?
yeah,
Because obviously Chanel is like a storied historical house, right?
yeah,
And it's weird to think that, you know, a brand that literally came up in the 2000s is seen as like more luxury than like one of the most famous luxury houses in the whole world. But it's kind of
mhm.
true. That's why I wanted to pose the question, because even people in the chat are saying, you know, the fact that Chanel had cheap Luxottica sunglasses, or the fact that it's a lot harder to get the road than it is to get something from Chanel. And then
Yeah. I
obviously
mean,
more people dupe Chanel, all those kind of things. So,
but the
you know,
duping
it's
of
very
Chanel
different.
and accessibility of Chanel worked for a point. Like when those bags, their signature, or I don't even know if they still call it their signature bags, but their bags kept on rising in price year by year after 2020 to where we are
Right.
now. Like the duping adds to it because on the other side, there are people who want the legitimate. So that is a consideration that has to be had. I think not even the question, the thing I'm thinking about also is Chanel are not necessarily in the best graces with the inner fashion crowd and some of outer circles because of quality conversations
Right.
and ethical
Right.
conversations, whereas the row hasn't reached a point where that can be a conversation. So this investment and them not even looking at it as competition kind of answers that in some ways.
Exactly why I pose the question, because if they already see the row as like it's positioned as more luxury than Chanel, then they don't see it as competition. So they're not trying to use like information that they get from the row to kind of put back into Chanel. They're just going to run
Mm.
the row as like a separate entity.
I assume they will run it as a separate entity purely because of scope, like where the row is situated and coming
Right.
from, and what consumer base they've amassed since 2006. Like one of the things like when you ask the question of Chanel and whenever we discuss it, but those three creative directors that have been suggested, I look at it and I go, okay, who do you bring as a consumer? Like which sort of people move with you? And
Right.
that is sometimes a consideration in these job things. It's across the board, like in any business. Like if you're in a high position, it's who do you bring that we couldn't get ourselves, no matter how we shifted our business and PR. And the role since 2006, even if they're not storied, they have an extensive list of celebrities that are now breaking the 50 million USD mark in terms of
Yeah.
like valuation and net worth, that are almost indebted to these two, the Olsen twins. Like they look at it and they're like, I've been buying this idea of luxury from you and this idea of being able to step out and be almost like a commoner when the paparazzi take a picture of me sometimes, but I'm wearing, you know, $10,000 worth of clothing.
Yeah.
They have these sorts of things that Chanel didn't have because Chanel had an older consumer and then the younger consumer was only buying the bag and fragrance. So that
Yeah.
gap is hard to bridge. It's so hard to bridge when you really think of it about it, unless you know. you hire
And it's
someone like
also
Jacquemus.
aesthetically, the row is just so different to Chanel. Like aesthetically, the row is more akin to like Jill Sander or like Le Mer or like those kind of brands. Obviously, there's obviously the brands that people associate them with, like Peter Doe or like Phoebe Philo herself, because obviously she started her eponymous label now. But those are more the brands that you consider when you like Jill Sander, Peter Doe, Phoebe Philo when you think of the row. But none of those brands are even close in terms of price or like how people view them in the luxury space.
It's the row is a very interesting. The main reason I think it's a very interesting conversation is because for a brand that started in 2006, their PR has put them in a conversation with brands that are like 50 years plus. Like, and then
Right.
they've gotten $1 billion USD valuation and had different sorts of hedge funds and capital investment firms. Like in the business side of it, that's why I said the back to back is interesting. Like, what sort of payment terminals are you using so that, like, where does that save you money? Where does that make you a better business? What sort of like connections and conversations put your brand in a place where maybe, this is me being optimistic and hopeful, you don't have to cut costs on production because your back end is so done well. Maybe you can afford to stay smaller because the share of profit you're making is larger because your brand is connected in so many different ways. Maybe you're doing more interesting things. Sometimes I'm hopeful because we can talk about designs all the time. Everyone will say it's a Phoebe Philo, Jill Sander lookalike brand with bags
Yeah.
that fights with Bottega, and it's hard to fight because they've acknowledged that it's a Phoebe Philo. It filled the gap that
They
Phoebe had.
have. They have. And also, they're not like designers with a capital D. Like they weren't out here, you know, on the floor making patterns and stuff. Like it is a brand where they saw an aesthetic they liked and they kind of replicated it, but also packaged it in a more luxury way, which I thought was a very smart move from them. And it was even more smart that they didn't associate the brand with themselves. They didn't call it, I don't know, the Olsens or something, you know what I mean? They called it the Row.
That would have killed
Um,
it though. No one is winning in that war anymore. I think we're in an era where you can't put your name on something and it, well, if you're not like a designer and it wins.
yeah,
It's
because it
it's
just,
weird,
you
but
can't get away from the associations of, oh, it's just a celebrity brand. But
yeah.
I don't think people buy the Row because they care about the Olsen twins. I think people buy the Row, some because of like elitism and like snobbery, some
Facts.
because they just have that much money and they just want a nice looking coat. And I guess they just don't want to like try any other brands like Jill Sander or Phoebe Philo herself, like her label or
Yeah.
whatever. So they just go to the Row. Because I think also some people, especially people with a lot of money, they just like to stick with one brand. It's easier. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
think as much. It's just like, okay, I buy the Row every month. Let me just go to the Row and see what they've got available right now. And it's too much stress to go and see, okay, let me look at Jill Sander. Let me look at the Phoebe Philo offering. Let me look at what Peter Doe is doing. Let me look at what Rock is doing. Let me look at what,
Unless they're
you know,
invited. Unless
exactly.
they're invited to. I mean the only rebuttal I say is like they had an advantage, like I said, like we were discussing earlier, where it's like they had consumers and certain high value in terms of like spend customers that they've met through their own personal lives and what they've done that
Yeah,
followed early on, and they can bring that wherever, and then catapult off that. The Olsen twins have had their own personal lives where they've met extremely wealthy people that have put them in rooms and positions to do certain things that a designer may not have the
exactly.
ability to
Wouldn't,
do.
yeah. Because even the rooms they can get in because they have access to these rooms are already like, even down to like production, who they can, the kind of factories they can use, the kind of people they can get contacts with. Like, because their contact book is insane compared to like
Oh,
some
it's
designer that just
massive.
graduates from fashion school and like you don't really have like industry connections. Like you can't get favorable figures from a factory. Factories are not going to give you discounts per item that they produce because
They're not going to
they
listen
don't
to
know
you. They're not
you.
going to
Like
answer your email.
yeah.
Your email's getting quick.
And it's such a big advantage. And that's why when I was saying earlier that, some people say that they don't use their celebrity status, I think they don't as much as any other celebrity brand, but they definitely use it and they definitely benefit from it just by having the contacts and having the start of their consumer base being this like really, really rich, like all my friends working
I mean,
Hollywood and our celebrity
Mary-Kate was married
singers.
to Olivier Sarkozy. He's like a French banker, like used to be part
Yeah,
of like French banking system. Like we're talking different sorts of conversations here when it's these two. It's not like Rihanna with LVMH trying to do that. It's not like Ivy Park Adidas. It's no. I've got French banking system connections. You know, like there's a different chat there. Like you can have access to loans that allow your brand to be completely different. That
exactly.
another group, and that adds to your valuation. That's the other point of it. Like when people look at the 1 billion and they're like, oh, it's a simple brand, they make simple things, rah, 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 it's some sort of luxury overpriced. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but like, do you have the connection to certain banking people in banking? Do you have client books that people have unnecessary amounts of finances on their side? It's
Exactly.
like, I'm interested to see the business. I hear people's concerns about the quality because it is a serious question. If we see 8 shows in a year with a bunch of resort collections, like an LA resort collection, then yeah, chop it, charge it. Skims collab, charge it. Then you know.
Skims collab with the road just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
It
But it's
starts
weird
like that, but
because
if they want to go athleisure, you've got the connection right there. You have them fighting with Lululemon, Aloe, and all of them. It's a joke at first, and then you see the collection in front of an Erewhon, and you're like, "Wow, this is insane." But it's like that's how these things happen. You just need the right you need the context. Like there's
yeah,
conversations in the business world about how like private bankers at like Goldman Sachs connect clients, and then you end up having these major business deals and so forth. And that's what certain investment funds and hedge funds tend to do, where they just connect each other so that they, one, save money, but two, make way more profit, because you don't have to sign deals there that you have to offer
right,
someone front end and back
right.
end. Also, it's just back end, where you're using an integrated system that you already purchased and bought your uncle, you know.
And you have to think that the rose profit margins, because most luxury brands spend so much damn money on marketing, and the row just don't even bother with like a lot of marketing because they don't need to, honestly, because they've done it in a smart way. They've branded it and marketed it in a smart way where they don't have to do all these like insane campaigns all the time and like pay for influencers to wear their stuff and like do all these activations for influencers in Paris, or all these different things that
Yeah.
luxury brands do. Have dinners with influencers so that they can post about it. They don't have to do that. And so that makes their profit margins even better than most luxury brands out now because their marketing spend is significantly higher.
Yeah, I'm assuming their PR team must be paid well, because their PR team knows when to tell stories about, the no phone show, who to tell
Right.
so that the story sounds right, like who's writing about the role and how information's fed, where they do the shows gets talked about. Like it's a very well thought out marketing plan that they have in their team. Their PR works very hard. So, people can criticize the look of the clothes, but it's the conversations happening around it are evident. The $1 billion valuation is happening, and it's not a joke anymore. We have it live and direct, guys. The row's worth
Yeah.
$1 billion.
Culture says, my question is, how is the road going to be shown going forward? They don't need so many shows, but will that change? And that's the thing, because that's the thing about investors and their expectations, because you have to think about it this way, right? At the end of the day, the row is supposed to be like at least it's branded like a slow brand.
Mm.
And so if they start doing 15 collections a year, it's off brand and they'll lose their core audience very quickly and everything will go tits up. If there's so many things they can't do because I just think it'll backfire.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think it's scary because of that's why I kind of said at the beginning, it depends how quickly their investors think that they need to recoup on that investment.
Like
Because I
the
mean they
row
probably have,
customer,
yeah.
these people have money. Like these are rich celebrities. Like these are millionaires, billionaires, like lawyers that are partners, like bankers. Like these aren't, the second it starts going too tacky and they start over marketing it and then people feel like it's not exclusive anymore, all of them are going, literally.
Yeah, no, 100%. They lose a lot if they start. If I see a resort collection done in a funky town in the US, it's game, bro. Like it's game. It's game, bro. Like, because that's the thing, you're sitting on it. It's the scariest thing I think sometimes in business is people think it's starting, which is very hard. 100% starting is hard. They obviously had an advantage, capital access from being actresses and etc. etc.
Yeah.
But it's when you have to make that major pivot, that like that wrong turn you make can like throw away 40% of your consumer base and like 80% of the work you've done. And it's
Right.
like, ooh, because you're in the conversation with Chanel's now. Like Chanel has invested in you, and we seen what's happening to Chanel. We don't know where Chanel goes next. We can guess. We can also guess with this, but I mean, we have a clearer direction with the row, I would argue, of where it will go.
Yeah, someone said, I think the investors will force some change, but what? Yeah, I kind of touched on it earlier. There's a lot of growth potential because there's a hole in like they don't do a lot of beauty products, which is, it makes perfect sense why L'Oreal obviously is getting involved with a brand that makes this much money without a very extensive beauty portfolio. That is 100% why L'Oreal is involved. Like they're literally just going to come and be like, use our infrastructure. Let's start making perfumes that are really luxury. And because it's the row, they'll literally sell these perfumes for like $2,000 a bottle. Like their profit margins are going to be disgusting. Like their profit margins, L'Oreal's going to come here and start making facial moisturizers that sell for $400. Like they're going to start making $3,000 lipstick. Like that is literally what L'Oreal is going to come and do because it's such a big area for brands, like the beauty market. And then of course you have menswear that can be expanded. There's a lot of work that can be done. Obviously they have really strong bags. That's what a lot of people go to the row for, but there's more that could be done there. So there are like different elements where there's a potential for growth. I'm just hoping that they do it in the way that the row is known to do it, in a slow way, trying to keep the quality the same, even if they're trying to increase distribution, kind of do it in their way. They can obviously invest in more homeware as well, homeware collection.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So there's a lot of things they can do, to be honest. Like when you really look at it, there are a lot of product categories that they can look into.
I guess the question I'd ask people in general, because I have no answer, I'm not in the makeup industry, but like if they went extensively in the makeup industry and just came out with a bunch of products immediately, would that turn people away?
If they do it immediately, yes, I think it will. I think they need to like do it slowly, which is what the row does. The row is not the kind of brand that just like releases 50 products at once. That's not the row way. That's very, very off-key and off-brand for the row. It doesn't make sense. That's not the way the row does things.
Yeah, I can definitely see homeware going triple platinum. Their homeware would I can see the Architectural Digest, every celebrity will be like, and I got this from the row. Thank you, Ashley and Mary-Kate. Like I can see it already. Like it'll be in films. Like I see the pipeline already of like their homeware. Because even if when we showed the Instagram, the first thing I thought is when a brand shows you art, music, and a little bit of clothes, it's homeware. It's like this screams on making homeware. And
because their Instagram
was
is
it?
along those lines. Like, look at this, like a lampshade from 1964. They could make something that's a lampshade and like sell it for thousands of dollars, and people would buy that stuff.
Right there. I see the vision. They just charge a stupid amount for stuff. They're gonna sell other people's art. Like it's gonna go down that path. I don't know who it was. We spoke about it. Someone else. There's other brands. It might be Kith or ALD also sell art. Oh no, they sell Rolexes and stuff. But they're brands that sell art in their stores. Like that's the next way. People are gonna sell art, homeware. Like you go into the shop and it's a one-stop shop. Everything you get
for everything,
cosmetic.
literally.
You get your baby pram. You get maybe a few baby shower clothes for the friends. Your bag to take all the stuff in. You get a new lampshade, a couch, and then you go out. Bob's your uncle.
Aaron says the row is the embodiment of less is more, and that is why it will now hold and stand on a more exclusive and luxurious pillar than Chanel will. Yeah, that's why we had the conversation earlier where we came to the conclusion that people view the row as more luxury than Chanel in this current time. Undersit says beauty companies often invest in fashion brands because when they release cosmetics, the value of their stock nearly always increases. Oh yeah, that's a good point too, because yeah, once you start expanding your product base, it only makes sense for the stock to go up. And if they were to sell it immediately after, they would make so much money.
And the margins on the cosmetics industry is insane. Like the
It's
margins,
disgusting.
I think maybe the most expensive thing would be how you promote the product, because some of the stuff that they do is tell you about an ingredient they found in South America that hasn't been used for hundreds of years and it's great for your skin, and add revitalizing on, say it's FDA approved, and boom, I'll probably pay for the FDA approval and you're done. You made 100 million. Like,
honestly, I find this prospect of every brand being a one-stop shop like a department store horrifying. The amount of waste is nauseating. I totally agree with you. I'm with you on that one. But for the sake of like a business conversation, I feel like that's where they would go with it. Because that's just how major corporations see things.
Finn is saying they already sell furniture and art. Yeah, I think he might have said that before. So
Yeah.
more.
We're just
You can't
saying
stop
it'll
now.
happen more. And they'll have like full-on extensive homeware collections, which they can expand. Which I can just see that happening. I honestly can just see that happening in the near
Once they
future.
tap into the Asian market fully, like they just go there and kill the game. Like, I mean, it's not a promise. Let's just be real. Like, it's not a promise they will, but you know, they can go there and have some fun. You know, do something interesting. I hope.
Yeah, 100%. Michael says the Row is probably going to introduce a fragrance in a low-key way and charge $350 to $400. I just feel like they would charge more than that, because that's the price of like Dior's private line or Celine's fragrances, like the big bottles. I feel like the Row, because it's seen as more luxe, they would have to like it'd have to be like $600 or $700. It has to be outrageous. But yeah, the profit margins of fragrances are insane, because when you're a company like L'Oreal, the economies of scale are insane, because they buy these raw materials in such bulk that to make a bottle of perfume is not even costing them like $1 in raw materials, even if they're using like what are considered expensive ingredients, like more natural materials and stuff like that. It's still dirt cheap for them because they just buy them in so many quantities, because L'Oreal owns the rights to too many fragrance lines, like way too many. So they just bulk buy raw materials across like how many perfume divisions. So the economies of scale for a company like L'Oreal is insane. Like, even if they're charging $700, the max it's costing like $10 to $15 for them. Because the reason why niche perfume is expensive, apart from, it not being as readily available, the economies of scale being worse, is also when these companies are so tiny, it costs them loads of money in raw materials because they buy very small quantities. That is not the case for L'Oreal. So even when L'Oreal has one of their companies making luxury fragrances, it's very cheap for them to make. So the profit margins, they're laughing to the bank with the Row once they start a fragrance line.
Yeah, they laughing to every bank, global banks, Swiss banks, French banks, every bank. They laughing. I think I think it's very interesting, especially because of how they present a lot of their Instagram and stuff. I think even they'll save a lot on marketing because they'll do such interesting bottle design. I know this is like me assuming quite a
Right.
lot, but you can if you look at the path, they're priming their customers to see certain things as out of the box. Sorry for lack of a better term, but like the clothing doesn't have to be, because it's everything else will be a backdrop for how simple and clean and the clothing will be, but everything else is like somewhat extravagant, somewhat inspired by Hellenistic period Greece, or it would be Roman inspired. Like that vase, immediately I'm like, oh yeah, I can see what sort of timing they're getting on with some of this stuff.
Right.
And that's 1930, and you see this.
Yeah, because they're just posting art that they find
Francis
interesting.
Bacon even. Oh yeah, we're
I've
done.
seen some Salvador Dali artwork here. It's just like clothing, and then in between, just like artwork, homeware, all these kind of things that they're interested.
Yeah. And I mean, this picture we're looking at is this still is like 65 weeks ago. Like they don't even have a crazy not engagement, but like amount of posts and so forth. So they
don't have crazy engagement either. Like 2,000 likes for a brand that has, let's see, how many millions of followers do they have? 2.5 million followers isn't good engagement at all, but it's because it doesn't matter. The kind of people that buy the row, like a lot of them aren't liking pictures of the row on Instagram, to be honest. So
yeah,
it
they
doesn't
don't even
really
want you
matter.
to know that they're on Instagram. Some of these people is like, yeah, it's interesting. It's actually very interesting. Like I think for how they present themselves, the row can go so many ways, but at the same time, it's almost like if we all sat down, like everyone here sat down, we could probably guess the next move, and then they'll just charge like 7,000 USD for whatever we think that they're gonna do, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Is it gonna work though? Is it just that thing?
Jennifer said, I feel like we're having the expensive convo that Style Zeitgeist has had about Totem, Kite. Those brands are expensive cause. I mean, like, if we're talking about like design, because obviously you've talked about a business, we're having a business conversation. From design, there's absolutely zero revolutionary about the row designs beside their bags. But the clothing, there's absolutely nothing original about it if we're going to have that conversation. But, if customers are willing to pay for it, then that's why it's a viable brand. And I think that they've branded their way into creating such a strong and substantial brand, even though it's completely unoriginal.
I mean,
if we're having an originality conversation, it's not original at all.
But I think that's part of like how they got to where they did. Like you always talk about how like they filled the gap between the Phoebe Philo eras, and especially in the most recent one before her namesake was had come back. But if I bring it to a very business point of it, is like, yeah, why would I change anything when all of the market research I would have had to do has been done by other brands where I can see their best products, their winners, everything. Take some of the people that used to work at some of their brands because they don't have jobs maybe, or they disgruntled in their current positions, and slowly roll into the next phase of what we're going to do. And it's yeah, we're going to see a lot. I think even what Finn said earlier, he was talking about they're going to change fabrics. I think that's probably, I would have thought by now they have quite an extensive list of fabrics. But yeah, I mean, you can never have too many, apparently,
Yeah, Understood says, I wonder if the hype is so big right now and the marketing is so classic, if it's got a bit overvalued and won't see the heights they're expected to reach right now. I guess that's a good question to ask. I just feel like there's so much growth potential because they haven't even started like the big money makers like beauty yet. I just can't see how they're going to be worse off after making beauty products. But I think outside of the beauty stuff, if the clothing starts to get watered down and the Chanel comes and the Wertheimers come and start doing their cutting corners thing, the brand is going to get watered down very fast. And I think people lose interest because what is appealing about the row? The fact that it's luxury, how it's branded, the associations that you associate with the row, the fact it's seen as like a serious brand for serious women, right? That care about quality and timeless pieces. All of that breaks down the second that the quality goes down, because once the quality goes down, there's nothing left. There's nothing original there. Like I can get the same silhouette at Phoebe Philo literally now on Phoebe Philo's website. So if the quality starts to break down, what else is there? Like the clothing isn't that original. Like I said, I could literally go to Phoebe Philo the same way. So if Chanel come in and fuck up the quality, that's a disaster. That's a total disaster.
Yeah, 100%. I think the hype probably accounts for a lot of the valuation. But part of why we can't disregard it is they have so much, like, cultural cachet in that hype. Like, when we have
Right.
a conversation about the idea of quiet luxury, unfortunately, they are one of the first names you're going to have to bring up. I still hate the term. That's kind of my thing, but, like, if you have that conversation and you ignore them, then you may be replacing it with Phoebe Philo again, maybe now, but even she doesn't have the same hype in the space as the Row does now, and the cultural culture in the zeitgeist. Maybe in the fashion circles, she probably has more because there's layers to it.
100%.
It's like how far out of the enclosed fashion circle are you to actually respectably have that hype? Well, not just hype, but the valuation. It's potential. It's how much you are worth now in the space. Because if I can invest in the space, who else do I go for? You may not have access to get into a Bottega to spend your 300 million.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Observing the Matrix says, I think people also underestimate the possibility of Chanel intentionally ruining them over a few years to rid them of the competition. I totally believe that will never happen because that's an expensive way to ruin a brand. Like, why would you spend all that money just to try and ruin a brand? I don't see a world in which that happens.
I think that the Chanel investment is very interesting. Actually, me and Unstitch spoke about it on text the other day. I think we are going to see a perfume.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? That's the only. I can see that happening in the next 18 months, and I bet they've already worked on it. Do you know what I mean? But then even, I was thinking about niche perfumes from brands. Everybody always thought that Rick Owens was going to release a really commercial perfume for ages.
Right.
And then they did that one. Have you seen the one perfume they did?
I don't think I have, but I know he did a lot of stuff with, is it Aesop? Aesop?
Yeah, so he did a one-off collaboration. They did a perfume with that.
Right.
But he did one that Michelle led. And you could only buy it in their flagship stores, and it was £1,000 a bottle.
And if Rick Owens is charging that, I just feel like the Rose is going to charge more.
Yeah, no, exactly. Sorry, yeah, that was the point. Like, they're literally going to just charge up the fucking nose. I mean, do you know, I was talking to my friend who's an exec, and she's an exec at Nike. And she has bought anything between Dior. She used to be a huge Rick customer, right? I keep bringing up Rick, but I guess that's my friendship group. She used to be a huge Rick customer. She used to buy Crocodile Rick jackets. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Then she went to Dior with Maria Grazia, and I was like, why have you done that? And she was like, look, the reason why I wear Dior is because nobody comments in the boardroom, but I look expensive. And then I said, do you buy the Row? And she said, not on my fucking Nelly. And I was like,
Damn.
why not? Because she was like,
damn.
She kind of made a fair point when she was like, I don't want to look like a child with a, what's it called? Not a hedge fund, a trust fund.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, and she was like, you go to New York, and she lives in, ironically, she lives in Boston, which is so weird. But, she was like, you go to New York, and the only people wearing the Row are now influencers or people who live on the Upper West Side. And she's like, at some point, that actually tarnishes your image.
Does she? But then, how do they know it's the Row though? Because I'm being so honest. I'm not even trying to be shady. I can't distinguish like the Row from Phoebe Philo on the street, or like some of Daniel Lee's Bottega. Like they all just look the same, or like even old Phoebe Philo, Celine. They all just look the same.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I mean, I'm a huge Phoebe Philo for Celine fan, so I actually can tell the difference. But I would say there is some defined, like the bags, for instance, is the Margot.
Yeah, the Margot.
The Margot I'm seeing everywhere in London now.
Yeah, I talked about it earlier.
It's like it's a Margot pandemic. During Fashion Week, I saw more fucking Margot bags than I did any other bag. I was like, I thought these were hard to get.
Understood says what Finn is talking about is what I was talking about, it being overvalued right now. Oh, because of the hype.
Totally. Yeah. I think do you remember basically she copied a shoe that Phoebe Philo did for Celine that was a copy of a Helmut Lang shoe, which is like a boot with a zip on the front.
No surprise. That's the pipeline, because Phoebe Philo did copy a lot of Helmut Lang anyway.
Yeah.
It's normally like Phoebe Philo took Helmut Lang stuff and then people just like catted Phoebe Philo's clothing to the ground.
I think people forget how much hate she got for how much she copied Jill Sander and Helmut Lang.
Did she get hate though? I feel like when I talk about it, people like hate me for bringing it up. Like people like, why are you acting like she's like? People get really angry when I talk about her copying Jill Sander or Helmut Lang. So I don't know if she got a lot of hate for that.
Interesting. But in terms of the row, sorry, I'm actually trying to be concise for once, which never happens. I think that once the hype dies, and I think it will die, they will struggle.
And
I think they will need a perfume to keep them alive. A bit like prior to Virginie Viard, Chanel was actually struggling a little bit. You know, and then she brought in things like denim, which completely changed their ready-to-wear game. And then she had to queues outside to buy her denim, which is wild.
Right.
But my friend is their head of shoe design at the moment. Director of shoe design, I think.
At the Row?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was at Loewe and Bottega and Celine. And she said...
Interesting.
Yeah. But she also did, before going to the Row, a season at Kate's.
Oh my God. There's all the brands all in one. Like the whole...
But
it's the holy square.
The American brands actually pay them good money. Because they've got money. But she was saying that... But no, yeah, she said it was the most free environment. It is the most free environment she's ever worked in.
Oh, nice.
So, and they were like, they will literally let her do anything that she wants in terms of shoes, which is kind of...
I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing. Part of it is because they're not like, you know, designers that can really... They're not McQueen, you know what I mean? They're not going to like give loads of pointers on like how to design a shoe because they probably don't know how to themselves. They just have like a very strong taste level that's obviously heavily inspired by Phoebe Philo, and they just want that to be pushed through the brand, right? So I can understand why she has the freedom to do more things there.
Definitely. But apparently from the ready-to-wear point of view, they are very involved. Like they're with the pattern cutters. And I don't like the brand.
Why not? I'm just curious.
It's not for me. I think we've had this conversation before. Like, when I was younger, I was obsessed with this idea. Like, I love Phoebe Philo, right? And when she was at Celine, I used to buy like, I was so obnoxious. I used to save money to buy Phoebe Philo at Celine. Like, bleh. And, you know, and now I'm at a point where I'm like, I actually don't care if I look like I have money or not, because I know whether I do or not.
Right.
You know, and it's just boring. It's so boring. And cashmere coats do not cost that much
to make, but obviously a lot of brands sell them at exorbitant prices.
But even Loro Piana, like, you know, Loro Piana is the number one supplier of top-level fabrics in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Even theirs are not that expensive, but I guess there's an argument it's direct to consumer. But
yeah,
I don't know. I do sit there sometimes and I think, are you okay in the head?
Yeah, I think the Row is like for me, it's like an interesting case study, but I've never thought of it as like. Do you know how I see the Row? Like how I see the Row is like
Hold on. It's Ralph Lauren for rich people.
Kind of, but I was even gonna go worse than that. It's like So the bags are really, really interesting. I think their bag design is sensational. And the way they've branded it is like fantastic. But when it comes to the clothes, I see the row as like with Phoebe Philo's label now, which I actually do like a lot. I see it as like a limited version of Phoebe Philo. Like the row is like they copy Phoebe Philo, but there's only like 30% of Phoebe Philo's product range available via the row, and then the other 70% you have to go to Phoebe Philo herself to get all those other silhouettes and other colors and prints and patterns and textures, right? So it's just a limited Phoebe Philo or a more uninteresting Jill Sander is kind of how I've always seen it in my head.
TC has made a fucking amazing comment, and I realize you're recording this, so sorry, I'm swearing, AdSense. Their bags are old fucking Prada bags, made in leather rather than nylon. They're 90s Prada bags made in leather.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed this because they have a bag that's literally called the 90s, and Prada still make the same bag. Sorry, just to get on my high horse. And then somebody made a comment.
Keep going.
About, no, sorry, I'm on one. After this fashion week, I'm so angry. One thing that the row has done, and it's something Phoebe did really well, and it's something they have copied, but it is effective in terms of a brand and creating a brand. They have become the one-stop shop for rich people to look like they have taste. And what they do, instead of giving them taste in terms of, you wear our clothes, you're interesting. Their stores are so interesting. So you have, that one artist that maybe not everybody knows.
Right. It's like top luxury experience, right? Across the industry.
Exactly. So they're telling them, look, this is the new artist that you should be buying. Do you know what I mean?
Which is hilarious because then if everyone buys from the same artist, there's no where's the individual taste?
Yeah, no, it's true. They don't have taste. Oh, I'm so angry. Fashion Week's fucking pissed me off.
Finn, apparently you run from one end of your room to the other during the streams.
No, it's called being fat.
TC says the row is successful because of symbolic value. The women want to belong to the community that buys the row.
Although you did put on a comment. Oh, gone.
Yeah, they make the rich people feel good. That's it. They're feeding them taste. Interesting.
And
yeah, right, Finn, actually, what comment were you talking about?
Sorry, with the feeding them taste thing. There used to be, when I used to work at a department store, people used to say that Chanel was for gypsies, not for people that actually buy luxury clothes. How bad is that?
Wait, who used to say that?
The whole of a certain department store that I worked at.
Oh my god, that's an insane statement to make.
The row is for rich people with class and security. I agree. But 2018, you put it on there earlier, was the pivotal moment, I think, for them.
When did you say 2018?
You put it on there as
Yeah. I said that, and I said that because that was when Phoebe Philo had left Celine, and so yeah, that's when Phoebe Philo left Celine. So that's when the customer base kind of opened up, because before then, their customer base was kind of growing slowly. But once she left Celine, it just exploded. Because I remember at the time, they were doing all these articles, like in Vogue, in Women's Wear Daily, because I think she left Celine in like 2017, right? So it was one of those things where they were doing all these articles in Vogue and Women's Wear Daily and BOF, like, if you miss Phoebe Philo, here are the alternatives. Yeah. If you're craving Phoebe Philo, here is where to go. And it would be like the Row, Jill Sander, Rock, Peter Doe, all those kind of designers. So yeah, it's always been a thing that, like, when the Row really, really exploded was in that time frame when Phoebe Philo left Celine.
And also, whilst we're on the conversation of Phoebe Philo, have you looked at her most recent collection? Have you had a live about this?
No, I haven't looked at her most recent drop. I haven't seen it.
You don't need to. I think it's fucking awful.
Uh-oh. This is coming from a Phoebe Philo fan, because I'm not a Phoebe Philo fan, but you are. So why do you think it's awful, in your opinion?
So, allegedly, no. It's even worse that I'm friends with her daughter. Do you know what I mean? And she was
Uh-oh.
and I said it to her face, you know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This new collection, obviously, there's a whole thing where they're basically doing, like, they do those drops, don't they? Do seasonal drops, 3 drops each season, and they're an edit of that, whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
But the actual collection, I'm like, this isn't good. Like, this isn't technical in a way that makes me want to spend the money. This isn't luxury. I don't know what you're trying to be.
What about it makes it not luxury, though?
It's just like acid wash jersey t-shirts. What am I, Top Man in 2008? Like,
are the fabrics interesting anywhere, or is it also like lackluster fabrics?
It's viscose.
Oh no.
And I'm over it.
Yeah, that's another can of worms, obviously. But my thing with viscose, because you can have products that are, you know, made with viscose that are like decent quality. My thing is just every brand seems to be using viscose these days, like every single brand.
Yeah, I think because they're trying to say it's sustainable, which it isn't. Anyway, but also they do some really nice things. Like they do these like popped collar shirts, which is a continuation of the first season.
Right.
Which, you know, all of the stuff that sold really well, they're now continuing every season, which is a normal thing most brands do. But the stuff that they're adding, I'm like, this just isn't interesting. Like, and I actually give the Row credit for innovating in their collections. Compared to Phoebe, which, you know, as I said, I'm a massive Phoebe fan. So as much as I don't like the Row, I actually don't like Selena. I don't like Phoebe Philo at the moment.
Yeah.
Because you could not tell me this looks like a new collection, which I know it's supposed to be a continuous wardrobe, whatever.
I've always said, this is why I understand the timeless thing, but longevity-wise, the reason why I'm not really the biggest fan of like brands like Phoebe Philo or like, you know, those kind of designers is it just feels like once you buy 2 coats, what else are you buying?
Yeah.
Especially like Phoebe Philo now. With her Celine, that definitely wasn't the case because season to season, there'll be some like the pumps. Oh my God, they're amazing. Like the footwear was insane and really innovative when she was at Celine. I think she does footwear really well and stuff like that. But I think at Phoebe Philo, her eponymous label, it just becomes like once you get like 2 coats, a few pieces of footwear, and like some earrings, like what else is left to get? Everything looks the same season to season. Like what brings you back?
But then I guess, you know, I think we've had this conversation in the chat before, but you know, the person that's buying Phoebe Philo is the same age bracket as her and already has a wardrobe of all of her Celine stuff. So maybe she's not trying to reinvent the wheel. She's actually just trying to be like, here's your dailies, you know, here's your basics.
Yeah, and understood. When it comes to fabrics, the fabric conversation, unless I'm like feeling the fabric itself, is not really it's not necessarily a very good conversation to have or a very constructive conversation because every fabric has good grades and bad grades. Even like cotton, you can get horrible cotton and really good cotton. You can get horrible wool and really good wool. So even if something is 100% wool, it could be really shitty wool, even if it's still 100%. And then you can get something that's like 100% wool and it's like amazing. So it's like, just because something is 100% wool, it honestly means absolutely nothing to me. I still need to feel the fabric and I still need to like test it.
It's like saying Uniqlo quality is the same as a piano. Same comp.
Yeah.
Hold on. What? Some Understitch said, I was speaking to an ex-exec at a big house recently and told me Philo isn't selling. Well, I agree. And also, the quantities that they make are not very high. So,
I also just think fashion has moved on. I think fashion is a bit of it's a really tough industry, right, to stay relevant in for a long time, because like she took a break and it just feels like her customer base honestly just went to the row and went to all these other brands. They're not really going back. It doesn't seem like.
But then, you know, that being said, that the Gucci section in Dover Street Market is becoming the Phoebe Philo section from January.
Right.
So they have a market, but I just don't think it's selling as much as they want it to.
This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.